I've officially lived in Texas for 1 full year, and here are some things that still confuse me. People actually pronounce it Waterburger.
Sam Speiller says she loves living in Texas, and her series of Texas-themed videos is proof.
And here are some things that still confuse me. Part 2, Part 6, Part 8, Part 16. Dragonflies do a lot of fornicating.
Video after video, her unique comedic style of celebrating the Lone Star State has earned her millions of views and likes and nearly 100,000 followers, and counting.
The left lane is just for passing, but also the right lane will be for passing too if you go too slow.
I'm Marquez Took, and this is TikTalk, the podcast about TikTok creators that entertain and engage us. And as a Texas native who lived away for a while and really appreciates the idiosyncrasies that make Texas so darn Texas, I love Sam's videos. And I also love how riled up my fellow Texans get in the comment section. Hotter than a Texas summer in there, but never too hot for a cowboy hat. So I feel bad, Sam, for the people that are listening to this and not watching it. I feel like I should have the cowboy hat on as we are conducting this podcast interview.
That's your way of nudging me to put on my hat that I got from Buc-ee's.
There you go. Well, for people who have seen your TikToks, they know that you are in Texas, and then you have that beautiful coonskin cap. For people that haven't, this is not going to make any sense whatsoever, but it's still kind of funny nonetheless.
Yeah, it's so funny because I forget that not everyone has been with me for the whole journey. But the only reason I have this is because I was urged to check out Buc-ee's by some of my followers. And I visited it for the first and only time on a road trip to Waco. And I loved it. And I found this there. And I didn't realize that it was probably real raccoon on the tail. But it was only $9. I just thought it would be more expensive if it were. Anyway.
Well, that's the cost of living in Texas.
I guess so.
Well, that's how I first became acquainted with your content, was one of your I've lived in Texas for a year, officially now videos. Here's what I've learned. And kind of went down the rabbit hole of your content, as one does on TikTok, which is part of why it is so great. But so I'm going to get a little bit of what your story is, because you're relatively new to the state. You've been here for how long now?
April 2021
okay.
is when we bought our house here. And
moved. What drew you to the Lone Star State?
Well, so my husband and I are both performer comedian backgrounds, and a lot of comedy theaters closed in the pandemic, including the one where my husband was working and my remote job was still remote. And suddenly we weren't tethered to Los Angeles, which is not where we're from. We had moved there from New York City. I grew up and moving around. I consider myself like a coastal person. And so we weren't tethered to where we were living, to the city of LA anymore. And suddenly we felt like we had more options, and we looked at the country and we looked at places we wanted to have an adventure. We wanted to give our daughter a good life. And I didn't want super cold weather, and I got what I wanted.
Especially this summer.
Not cold weather. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Except for that 1 week.
Yeah.
That we did have.
The week that shall not be named.
And it all felt like true kismet. I really had no business buying a house in the market that we did, and we bought it for asking. It was not, we were the only offer, the first and only offer, and it was a financed offer. And so I say that because a lot of people in Texas are rightfully weary of outsiders and the way things might be changing the landscape of the housing market. I actually never really knew if I would become a homeowner. It was a very big deal for me.
Especially coming from Los Angeles.
What?
Especially if you came from Los Angeles.
Never in Los Angeles. I knew I could never in Los Angeles. And not anywhere I, would want to raise my daughter at least. And we just went for it. And I had only really been here one time, went for the inspection, and my daughter and I flew, and my husband drove with our dogs, and it's been really great. We had the playgrounds were open, which was a thing that they weren't. There was caution tape. We couldn't even play outside for like a whole year. So it was amazing to just arrive here and be able to let my daughter out to play. And I actually, one of my first TikToks that did well was me trying to figure out what the cicadas were. Which is funny because anytime I think of a TikTok is going to get low views, I'm like, that's a British. I was going to care about that. And then it those are the ones that do well. The ones that I like never do. Um, uh, and so I just kept observing Texas from in the way that I do, which is sort of like a nerdy science mind.
But it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like, and even in just a short time chatting with you on here, I feel like you almost have like a TikTok character that you've gone into, or at least for some of the Texas videos, where it is that scientific approach to this strange place that you live that has all of these different aspects that you didn't experience on the East Coast, in California, etc. And that's maybe, I don't know if that's on purpose. You mentioned having a performing background. If that was by design, but I feel like it's really worked.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I sort of I don't know if some of it comes in the editing, I think that and like I get a lot of people say I don't blink, and it's because I edit out the blinks. But I became really obsessive, or I try to keep the TikToks as short as they can possibly be and not waste anyone's time with like a half a second like mouth pause or whatever. And so, but then you lose blinks, which I learned the hard way is not great either. But yeah, I think I'm nicer than maybe I might come across in my TikToks. And but I I appreciate it because I think it's a great place to have fun with people who want to also have the spirit of fun, which is like, I say I'm a comedian and a silly meanie, because like I like to, it's sort of like a snarkiness that some people appreciate and some really don't. But none of what I say about Texas is meant to be snarky. Actually, it's really just I've never experienced this before, and no one told me. Like the things that I was
That wasn't in the brochure.
about.
Yeah, the cicadas weren't in the brochure.
No, there's so many more bugs in general that also like have concentrated arrivals in your life here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I never experienced that in other places. And
Well,
also, I'm not saying I'm like a universal person. Like I am sort of indoorsy, and so that's also maybe part of it. But where I lived, I didn't see the things like I'm seeing here.
It's funny because I'm a Texas native who lived away for a number of years before recently moving back. And Texans, I think, by and large, have this ability to make fun of themselves. But when an outsider makes fun of them, sometimes they're leery. And I've certainly seen that in your comments section, although I've loved it because you're right. There are so many aspects, idiosyncratic aspects of being in Texas and of Texans in general that seem completely normal to people who have lived their entire lives here and seem completely foreign to people who have never visited.
And it's really funny to me, and people are like, wait, your doors don't get funny in the door frame sometimes everywhere? No, they don't. They really don't. And I don't care what anyone wants to say. Their drinks aren't dripping in New Hampshire. They're just not. You don't get wet legs.
They don't sweat. Yeah.
They just, you don't. Well, I think that, and what I'm trying to do and what I feel is like, we're all can come together. Like it doesn't matter where you may be politically, you're all the same when you're running from a terrifying wasp. You know what I mean? Like we're all the same when we step on an anthill. It doesn't matter.
Is that akin to maybe the kinship that people have during during a zombie apocalypse? That like, look, I don't care who you voted for, I just don't want to get eaten by that zombie, and neither do you.
Well, that sort of makes Texas isn't the zombie apocalypse.
No, but the wasp, but they're being chased by a wasp. I mean, like allegorically, perhaps.
Yes, but it's more of like with a I feel more like an Indiana Jones than I feel like I'm afraid, if that makes sense.
In terms of when the wasp is after you, you're Indiana Jones.
Well, I'm screaming. Yeah.
Right.
I'm afraid to enter the home.
But before I get into your TikTok background, you mentioned a performing background and improv specifically.
Yeah.
Was performing, being in front of a camera or on a stage, something that always appealed to you growing up?
Yeah. I even went to theater camp. And I went to the famous Stage Door Manor theater camp in upstate New York. That I think they did a documentary on it. And I actually was in a play with Bryce Howard at camp there.
As one
so
does.
My whole life I was always what?
Yeah, as one does when you're in theater camp.
Right? Of course. Everyone does at theater camp. And shocking, she was the one who made it out of all of us.
Wonder how that worked.
Right? But so yeah, I've always had that performer sort of dream.
Hmm.
And then TikTok was just like an outlet when I was stuck at home, and I was like, oh, this is like I can actually perform. And it's like even just a one or two likes or follows from something is enough of like that dopamine hit that you go back.
That's an interesting aspect of this, which I want to get into in a bit. That dopamine hit, and because it's a double-edged sword for sure. But you mentioned getting into TikTok when you're stuck at home. Is that when you first hopped on? Was kind of the beginnings of the pandemic?
Almost 2 years ago now in the summer,
Hmm.
um, I was like losing my mind in August 2020 in Los Angeles.
I think that's common because I mentioned my brother being on TikTok, and it was kind of the same thing for him. We'd all been on other social media networks and Facebook and Instagram and the whole nine yards, and TikTok was this thing we kept hearing about. And I think, like a lot of folks, I went on there, and at first was kind of rolling my eyes at some of the content that was landing, and now I think it's the best show on TV. It's the best thing around. It really, once you get it tailored to the kind of content you like, it really is just an unbelievable collection of creativity and connectivity, I think.
Yeah, I think at first when you open it, you're like, why am I watching all these dancing? At first for me, at least when I first used, all I saw was like the hype house and the kids doing the dances, which I'm glad they have that they can do that. But as sort of see things, that the smartness of the algorithm is really cool. And it it's been interesting to me because I don't like to scroll too much anymore because I don't want other creators' ideas to like get into my mind. Um, but I also do want to support people that I also find funny or creative and who support me.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned not wanting other people's ideas to get in your mind. I know that I've heard, maybe it's an urban legend, but that, Saturday Night Live doesn't read any outside submitted content because they don't want anything they do to be, one, polluted by someone else's idea, in as much that it would ever feel like it was ripped off. That you have an idea that, oh, it came from someplace else, and it's really someone else's idea that you're just kind of doing as well, which Lord knows there's a lot of on TikTok
Well, yeah,
already.
I
But
think in the comedy world at large, that's like a cardinal
mhm.
sin. You don't want to steal anyone's material. Though I do think there's like subject matter that you can have a new take. There's always room for new take on something. Which is this is funny when the people that are so mad at me. I feel like I'm just that like who am I to talk about Texas? I'm like I'm just a lady with my opinion. You have yours too.
You're like, well, you're a taxpayer here, so I think you've earned the right. It
Yeah.
it has it has been interesting reading the comment section on some of your videos, and I posted some videos recently where I was breaking down the electric grid in Texas. And look, it's got its pros, it's got its cons, but the pushback from Texans, how dare you criticize anything that has the word Texas or Texan in front of it? Almost like this knee jerk need to defend the Lone Star State. And having grown up here, I get some of that. But the way people push back on folks that have moved here and stuff, it's just been interesting, and I get it. I get where that comes from. But at the end of the day, we all moved here from somewhere at some point in time.
That's not the loudest feedback.
Hmm.
I've been so grateful because what I wanted to do was, I'm trying to be a new person in a community, making friends with my neighbors as a new, I'm not trying to be an outsider stomping on, steamrolling the community that's here in any way.
Sure.
And so it has been such a incredible feeling to have Texans get it and be like, yes, welcome, we'll claim you. Because I say like I'm like a globe trotting tramp. I've lived in 7 states now. And so it's not really correct to call me a Californian either, but I'm not from here. So they are
Hmm.
right. But I feel like I've just as, I have a right to live here as, any other.
And you've earned the right to poke fun where you see fit. And look, at the end of the day, does anybody like wasps or fire ants? I don't think so.
Well, but I don't want them to be gone. That's the other thing is like I sort of admire Mother Nature. I admire and I admire Texans for what they put up with and have been putting up with sort of quietly that we didn't know the trials and tribulations, and except like sometimes I'll read comments and realize how I'm just ignorant to it. This is just because I'm brand new. Someone's like, there's a whole genre of music dedicated to how hard it is to live in Texas. So, I'm getting an education.
Well, it's the price that we all collectively pay to have easy access to queso and good barbecue.
Right.
So
Queso is amazing. I had never had it before.
it's really pretty spectacular. And if you've for the Texans who haven't ever ordered queso at a restaurant outside the state of Texas, they don't realize that the rest of the world doesn't understand
I've
how
never even seen it on a menu.
magical it can be.
Yeah.
So you get on TikTok, during the pandemic, again, like a lot of us did. But what was the moment? When did you kind of think, hey, maybe this is more than just fun. Like maybe I might be able to actually have a following here, and this is something that I want to spend more time doing.
I would say when I the 2 TikToks last summer where they had like 500,000 views and people were using the sound and duetting.
Because that's I feel like a different kind of feedback than just a like. When someone uses the sound and does the duet or a stitch or whatever.
When you start to see like you have engagement in a new way, where people are wanting to show their friends, they're wanting to create a stitch or a duet of it, and they I still get a kick out of the ones that people want to mouth to your like lip sync to your voice. But then and then more recently was with this series, when I hit 2 million, which was because before, like, and I would probably have kept doing this and getting it, like every like 5 TikToks I would get one that gets in the 100,000s of all different subject matters. And a lot of my favorite ones have nothing to do with TikTok. I have a lot of Etsy nightmare ones that I personally like. But with this series, that was when I was like, oh, and I discovered the playlist feature, and I made a playlist out of it. And actually another comedian on TikTok I had seen give that advice, like to keep something going and make it something that someone could binge watch. And so doing that, then you start to see people doing that in their lives. But to be honest, I still don't feel like I've reached anything other than just being a person who just has more followers than I did before. Because my life is no different other than people at like HEB look at me like, but they don't know how.
I heard you mention our cakes in one of your TikTok videos.
Yes. I love their cakes.
Yeah, they are pretty good. I mean, but have you gotten to the point now where you see goals for this? I mean, do you say, oh, it'd be cool to reach this milestone or to be able to?
Well, yeah, I'm looking for 100K followers would be very cool. I just am over 61K. And I would like opportunities if, opportunities were to come from it, that would be great. But I'm really focusing on making good content. Early on, there's a lot of like TikToks you can see of people giving advice about what to do on TikTok. And I'm sure most of them aren't that great, but this one lady just said like, focus on making good content so that when your moment comes and people get to your page, there's awesome stuff there already. Because it's not just about having like one good TikTok or whatever. And so that's like sort of just been what I've like tried to do is just keep making good content, which is for me content that makes me laugh, and hoping it's going to make other people laugh.
But I would imagine for someone who, had performing aspirations, that one of the cool aspects about TikTok is you get to be the writer, the producer, the director, the cameraman. I mean, some of that comes with some drawbacks as well.
Yeah.
But to be able to, I mean, this is your material. This is a one-woman show.
Yeah. You know what, that like if we're getting, truly honest and detailed, I would love to, I don't know if you've ever heard of Billy on the Street.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could do something really fun like that, or be a correspondent on a show like Ellen, or a late night show or something like that. Yes. Or just to get sponsored by HEB.
Yeah. Hey.
I can't get Diet Dr. B anymore, and I'm not saying it's my fault. But I'm not saying it's not my fault.
Right.
Saying for advertising I already gave them.
Look, correlation does not equal causality, but it might equal causality.
It may.
Yeah. What kind of content do you enjoy consuming when you're able to watch videos?
Um, I all different kinds. I like authentic people and authenticity, and I like cute animals,
Mhm.
and I like seeing people who are like trying to do something or uh like putting their heart out there. And so like I don't follow a lot of people, but if I happen to have the time while, scrolling or someone makes a comment and I see, I follow back people as much as I can because I like that connection. I really like Elise Myers. I think everybody
Oh,
does. She's just a doll,
spectacular.
like a cutie baby. Want to squeeze her cheeks. It's funny because I know she's also a mom, but I think we're probably like a decade apart. So I, I feel more like a big sister at least. Um, yeah, and I also sometimes like watching people who can dance. Like that's awesome. I can't do that.
I happened across the couple that they do a lot of dances together, but they did interpretive dances to the iPhone sounds, the ringtone sounds, and all that kind of stuff. And I think they pretty much nailed it. I saw a
A level
compilation.
of creativity that just blows my mind.
Just like I'm glad that the NBA exists for guys that are 7 feet tall and would be hard to live through regular life and do, I think, regular jobs at that size. Here's the NBA for these people. I feel the same thing about TikTok for people who have really creative skills that wouldn't necessarily find a home anyplace else. Like I don't think doing interpretive dances to the iPhone sounds on the Santa Monica Promenade probably is going to get you the exposure and recognition that a million people seeing it on TikTok will do.
Well, it's amazing because it actually gives everyone access to an audience. And it's not everyone. Not everyone is going to find the key to unlock as big of an audience as some. But for a mom who was working from home in a pandemic, I was able to access an audience, and that which has been really cool, and really fun at the same time.
You mentioned those TikTok videos that tell people how to make TikTok videos that are filled with tips, some of which are great, some of which aren't. But if somebody was trying to find their voice, their niche on TikTok, what have you learned that you think has been a kind of a best practice for you or that you would share with others?
Well, don't be afraid to. Okay, the number one thing is vulnerability is appealing. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. People don't like it's okay to have a TikTok. And it's funny. There are people who have seen me post an almost exactly identical TikTok like 5 times in a row, delete them, make them go back. Like there have been moments where I've totally melted down over stuff that like 200 people witnessed.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's all the views that I got. But vulnerability is appealing, and it's like perfection is not the goal. I've made a mistake in several of the videos that have gone pretty viral, including calling it blue bonnet ice cream, which is I just really hate myself.
Unforgivable.
But it's everyone. And so yeah, I would say don't be afraid to make mistakes because vulnerability is appealing. And do what entertains you. Like you need to enjoy the TikToks.
I know that it sounds cliche, but that idea of finding your voice is really true here. And whatever that voice may be, it could be interpretive dancing to iPhone ringtones. It could be what aspects of Texas that are head scratchers.
Right. But just like probably those dancers have been doing dance to unique sound probably for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I am not, didn't come from like thin air, and I've been also trying this on TikTok for 2 years. But before my friends would accept it or even watch it, like in the beginning, people my age are like, no, like we don't want to hear about TikTok. And now they're all like, can you show me how to edit?
Right.
So
No, what's that saying? It takes a lifetime to become an overnight sensation.
yes, exactly. So keep going because you will get better, even if you don't necessarily know that or feel that. Like to giving up before you've had a chance to like find your groove. And I'll just share this one interesting thing about the first one of that series was my first video to get 1 million was a draft from last summer that I found, and I was like, oh, and I redid it because I like didn't like the way I looked or whatever, which is like why I didn't. I'm vain. which is why I didn't post it at the time. But so that was like an old idea that I had given up on. And then what do you know? It's been it's actually helped me sort of clarify what my take on what makes my take interesting to people too.
The dopamine rush, you kind of mentioned it before, that hit of adrenaline when you get the likes, when you get the duets and the stitches and all that other kind of stuff. It feels like it's a double-edged sword in some ways, because I don't know if you've seen the documentary The Social Dilemma, that talks about how, social networks are
Oh, I didn't want to watch it.
I
don't want to know.
I'll summarize it for you.
It just talks about how these networks are really designed to lure us in with that hit of dopamine, and you want more of it, and you come back for more. And how sometimes, I think in the case of Facebook, how divisive content has the same effect, maybe even more so, and can lure us into these online back and forths that, where we say things we'd never say to somebody face to face. And I still find that in the comment section on TikTok, that people say things they would never dare say to your face. And so less of that, more engaging content, I think, is the goal. But there is this interesting kind of feedback loop when it comes to, I think, the way it feels to have something hit and people respond to it, because ultimately as people, that feels good in a lot of ways that I think are healthy. I think when it becomes where you've got to keep checking, you've got to keep looking, how many likes, how many views, where it becomes obsessive, that's the trick. Have you had to struggle with that at all? Or do you feel like at this point you have kind of gotten past it? Or what's that experience like for you?
I feel permission to be obsessed when I am about something that's exciting. So if I am feeling excited by a TikTok success, I don't beat myself up for like wanting to see how it's doing. But I also, have to do other things, so I can spend all my time doing that. Thank God, because if I had more time, maybe I would. But when it comes to things that aren't hitting or aren't doing well, that's when I don't let myself. I say, then make another one. I have a hard time holding back things that I've made when I'm excited about posting them, and trying to figure out the algorithm, because there's a recipe to it a little bit, I think.
What's been the coolest experience? Has there been like an interaction, an engagement with somebody who's watched your videos? Has there been like this peak of the mountain moment that was just really meaningful for you on TikTok?
Well, this whole experience so far feels really meaningful and cool. I feel like I'm still having that. But
was it when you got a message asking you to be on this podcast? Yeah. I mean, I think that probably was.
That was really exciting. And I got I'm going to be doing an interview with the Fox 7 on Wednesday. Yeah. But honestly, some of it is just having, like, when my friends and family like it. This is what it was. I will say, this isn't a good story. Is a parent from school, my daughter's school, was like, my sister texted me your TikTok, and I was like, oh, right, like, people who know me are seeing me, and so that kind of stuff has been that's been kind of fun when people have let me know that they've seen me, though I think I get a little uncomfortable. Don't quite know what to say.
Yeah, it's that weird thing. And I think I have that in my job. I go into a television studio and there's 5 or 6 people in there and a bunch of cameras, right? And I do this job and I'm among friends. And then I forget that there's people on the other side of that watching, Oh gosh, did I really say that the way I wanted to say that? Or did I put my best foot forward? Or maybe I should walk that back a little bit. I think that can certainly happen sometimes because it's vulnerable, like you said. You're putting a piece of yourself out there.
It is. And the how you do is public information, like whether you're succeeding or failing is for all to witness. But it's been great because what feels so good is people saying what I am trying to do, which is, people who sometimes will say, like, I'm sure we don't agree on a lot of topics, but you're hilarious and I love this series and I like welcome to Texas. And ultimately, like, what's best, I think, is for people to find unity in their communities. That's an awkward sentence. Unity in your community with Sam Speiller.
Healing the world one TikTok at a time.
That's right. Yeah. So
you mentioned, friends and family. How has it been a tepid response, or was it a tepid response in the beginning? Kind of maybe
so
not understanding.
I've been a little shy to share. So, and I haven't quite figured out integrating like Instagram and Facebook, which people are discovering. Might have to make my Instagram private. But so I don't share with my friends and family that much, and unless they happen to be on TikTok. I actually didn't know that someone who has followed me and liked my stuff for a long time is one of my first cousins, until she commented and she like said something, and I was like, oh, that's my grandfather or something. She's like, I know. It was my shirt. I was like, that's my parents. She's like, I know, it's your cousin.
It's me, Susan.
Yeah. For some reason, it feels easier to be vulnerable with millions of strangers than people who know me.
I feel like the integration part's tricky, because for the people that really want to be strategic about this content and grow it as much as possible, it is the YouTube and posting it to Facebook and cross-posting to other platforms, and even having different accounts for those things. I mean, you mentioned making an Instagram private. There's so much stuff I've posted on Instagram that's personal that I don't mind people seeing, but I wouldn't necessarily want the same audiences overlapping. There's stuff that friends and family are going to get a kick out of that I don't know that the rest of the world needs to see. So I think that strategy is exhausting.
Yeah. And especially because I don't have a strategy of doing this. So I who knows, in terms of like the DMs and who can reach you, like all that kind of stuff. I sort of feel like focusing on making the content and having fun, and the integration someday will come.
Yeah.
with Instagram. I did make an Instagram account with my TikTok name, Unmitigated Gall, which is a quote from my favorite old show, Stella, which I don't know if you remember that series from David Wayne. But it's private with no followers because I like couldn't figure out how to do it. But someday, maybe.
So I want to get into some of the Texas highlights. I'm going to put you on the spot here, since we kind of started our discussion with your arrival here in the Lone Star State. Can you think of a favorite aspect, or maybe like a top 3 favorite aspects of living in Texas?
Well, yeah, I love the geology and the like the sky. I love how expansive. I love just like being outside. And that's genuine. I miss that living in cities. I didn't realize that especially in the coastal cities, like that you don't see as many stars at night, and you don't have such just like the clouds. Honestly, the clouds that could be all 1, 2, 3. So that's like a big one. I also will say the kind people. Like we've built such a great group of friends just from the people at my daughter's school, and I really do find everyone is really friendly. Even when they find out I moved here from California, or that kind of thing, which you sort of expect maybe someone to be like, oh, which is I respect. But yeah, the warm welcome has been wonderful. And then also I really like the shaved ice culture here. I never had shaved ice with custard in the middle.
Oh, I have not had shaved ice with custard in the middle. Now I did have.
This is free advertising for Frozen Flamingo.
Wow, it's now on the list. I mean, I've got to check it out. I don't know if you ever made it to Blockheads when you lived in Los Angeles, but that's like was like a shaved cream situation, which was, if I could import that here to Texas and retire a millionaire, I mean, that'd be great, because it's pretty special. But I haven't had the custard in the middle of the shaved ice. So
well, in our town, like Kona Ice is this truck that comes to the school very frequently, and it's really like a refreshing thing that I don't remember having elsewhere.
Oh, as a kid, I remember riding my bike to get, shaved ice. There just was no custard, so that's an upgrade.
Yeah, well, that's me being extra, because that's not essential to the shaved ice culture, but it does add something.
Okay, so if those are the good aspects, if you're picking something to kick out of Texas, what could you name? And I no matter what you say, the comment section is going to be heated, but
yeah. Well, it's hard for me to say what I would kick out, because I understand I'm a nerd, and I'm like, I don't want the ecosystem to be out of balance. But I could live without the small bitey no-see-ums. I could really live without those.
Sure.
And fire ants.
Well, but let's be honest. The ecosystem in, I don't know, California, New England, Oregon, Washington, plenty of other lovely places exists just fine without fire ants. So,
but we don't know what else,
I get it. You pull out one building block and the whole thing collapses.
Yeah, and then there's no bluebonnets in the springtime or something.
Well, and then
can't risk that.
Yeah. Then where would you find your bluebonnet ice cream?
They don't, because they don't have wildflowers in other places the way they have here. That's why I mention it, because wouldn't want to offset, like the butterfly. Yeah,
I get it.
Well, I appreciate your time. This has been really fascinating for me, and it's such an interesting topic that I feel like there's so many aspects to just the TikTok experience as a viewer, as a creator, and as somebody who has had some success on there. Thank you for making some time and sharing your insight.
Thank you so much for having me and listening to me try and get through it. I hope it was a fun listen.
I can't wait till I've been in Texas for 2 years, and here's what I've noticed.
Well, I'm gonna come on a year and a half.
You're getting there.
I'll update it.
Yeah, more content to look forward to.
Thank you so much.
Clear eyes, full hearts, Texas forever. Again, a special thank you to Sam for hanging out with us. You can find her on TikTok at unmitigated.gall. And if you're not following her there yet, she is definitely worth checking out. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, subscribe, share. This makes this whole thing worthwhile. Tell your friends too. And as always, if you have any questions or comments or guests that you'd like to hear from, I want to hear from you. You can find me on all the socials at Marcus Took. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the TikTok podcast.